Welcome to Multifamily Insights. I'm your host, John Casmon, and I want to thank you for joining us for another great episode. If you're enjoying the show and getting some great value for your investing goals, please let us hear about it. Leave us some honest feedback with a rating and review. It not only helps us, but it also helps other listeners find this show and get the same great value that you're getting for your investing goals. And if you haven't done so, if you're a first time listener or an avid listener, be sure to hit that follow or subscribe button so you don't miss an episode. Look, we got a great show today. We're going to be talking to Matt Spagnolo. Matt Spagnolo has a background in business and economics. Now, his first career was in residential and commercial brokerage. Then he launched an investment branch with brokerage and now is the fund co-manager at Colony Hills Capital, raising capital from accredited investors for multifamily real estate. Let's welcome to the show, Matt Spagnolo.
Hey, John, how are you? Glad to be here.
Matt, great to have you on the show today, man. It's great to talk to you. I went over your bio at a very, very high level. Why don't you take 2 minutes and fill in some of those gaps?
Yeah, absolutely, John. So, I'm first off glad to be here today. My background started out of school, like you mentioned, in business and economics. Initially, out of school, got into the trading, equities, option side of things, and then was trying to find something to pair with that. And I started down the real estate rabbit hole. And once you get into it, as you're familiar, you probably can't leave it. So, just started networking in my local area and just was talking to a bunch of different people from sales to real estate investors to long-term investors, and everybody's saying, hey, start in the sales side, learn the network, learn the contracts, learn the business, build connections. And I started there, right? So I started on the residential side just as a quick intro, and then wanted to dive into more of the commercial side. I've always been numbers and statistics, so I like the investment side of real estate. And we started scaling small investment team there. We were doing fix and flips and looking to get into small multi. So anywhere from 5 units to as big as 100 unit deals locally here in Richmond. And we were in the process of that, but I got connected with my now CEO, Glenn Hansen, at a conference in New Orleans. And he was kind of telling me a little bit more about the team at Colony and how they're scaling, doing 200 plus unit apartment complexes, 50 to $150 million deals. And my eyes got super wide when I heard that. But he also talked about the co-GP fund that Colony has and some of the other little items that make Colony unique. And we just kind of hit it off for a few days. Tried raising some capital from him kind of on the side, and was able to be pretty successful with that. And now I'm on full time with Colony and been here for a little while, raising from high net worth accredited investors, more on the retail side. My partner Julian handles some of the institutional partners that we have. So super excited here and continuing to help Colony scale, and talk a little bit more to your listeners about how to kind of start scaling. I've learned a lot over the last few years with Colony. Seen some partners that we work with that are in the process of scaling too. So excited to kind of see where the conversation goes, and hopefully the listeners can take a few nuggets away.
Yeah. Hey, Matt, loves hearing about your background coming out of college, in business and economics, recognizing that, hey, you wanted to get into real estate. That vortex kind of sucked you in. You got excited
Yep.
about it. You started on the residential sales side, started there, eventually transitioned to commercial. And as you were kind of scaling that commercial portfolio, you go to this conference or this networking event, you come across the guy who is now the CEO of this company you work for, Colony. And in that relationship, you realize just the different levels that this game can be played at. And they're doing these larger 50 million type deals. You decide, hey, you know what? There's more to learn here. There's more to engage with here. And I love that you talked about that relationship started with multiple conversations. And then ultimately, you raising and being a part of a deal with those guys before coming on board full time. Can you talk to me more about just that journey? Because I think for a lot of our listeners, they're trying to figure out how to scale. The co-GP model has become more popular over the more recent years. Talk to me more about kind of your transition into commercial multifamily working with Colony Hills Capital.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think the biggest takeaway that I've had and the biggest eye-opening moment for me, and people have always said this when I was growing up, and I never believed them, right? I always thought that it's the money that gets you where you want to be and things of that nature, but it really is relationships, right? Relationships can open doors that sometimes even money can't. So developing those relationships not only in my network, right? I started with the relationships that I had already established and got some advice there. And then the growing relationship with my now CEO, Glenn Hansen, is growing even stronger by the day with our team. So they kind of created my position out of thin air, right? It's not like it was listed on Indeed and said, "Hey, we were looking for a fund co-manager," right? I just went up to him and said, "Hey, how can I add value to you?" And I asked for mentorship in return, and it kind of evolved from there, right? So I think another good takeaway, and people that are looking to get in and maybe learn something, or you want to pick somebody's brain, don't think of it as, "Hey, how can I get something from you? How can I get information from you?" Add value to them first. What Everybody needs help in some aspect, or is suffering in some way, and I think it's important to add value to that person and have the mindset that it's going to come back around to you, right? Versus seeking for yourself. Go out and see how you can add value to others, and then put out to the world what you're looking for, and I think it all will all come back around. So adding value and developing those relationships. It's a longer term vision. I think everybody has been so ingrained and we want results now. We want where we want to be right now. And sometimes it takes a little bit longer.
Matt, let's stick to that point because I mean, this is a story that plays out again at every conference, real estate conference in the world, right? You've
Yeah.
got a more established, more experienced operator, you've got a younger, hungry upstart, and they come across each other. That younger person typically is looking for the mentorship, the opportunity to be involved. They approach that more experienced operator and they ask directly or however they approach it, and usually it stalls out, right? So when you talk about adding value to someone like that, did he tell you exactly what he wanted you to do? Did you keep pressing to figure out what his challenges were? I think many people they understand conceptually what you're saying, the implementation of that strategy kind of falls flat. And I see it all the time when I'm out. People come up to me, they say things like that. And it's not like I have a job ready to go, like, yes, go do this. Right. So talk to me more about kind of how that went from this idea of, hey, I want to add value to you to actually being able to add value to them.
Yeah. And maybe I can just kind of tell you a deeper level of what the interaction looked like. So, and maybe I should preface this by saying nobody ever wants help, right? Nobody wants to state that, "Hey, I need your help," right? So the way that it was working at this conference in New Orleans, Glenn was actually leading a breakout session. So he was giving a detailed overview of Colony Hills Capital. Glenn's scaled multiple companies. He's kind of a serial entrepreneur at heart. And he was giving a breakdown on where he took Colony from 2008 all the way to where they were a few years ago. And I was just, again, really fascinated by his ability to scale, making all the right moves and decisions from a CEO level. And throughout the presentation, he kind of talked about, I love what I do, but I really love mentoring younger guys. He like said that, and my ears like perked up, and I opened my eyes and I said, you know what, I should take advantage of that. And he had invested in over 25 startups as well. So I'm kind of taking notes on things, one, that he's interested in, and two, that he enjoys, right? And gets amusement out of, so to speak. And after that presentation, everybody left to go to lunch. And I just approached him after saying, "Hey, thank you for your time. I appreciated the conversation. I know you invested in over 25 startups. I've got a quick elevator pitch for you on a business idea that I had." And I gave him a quick 30-second rundown on what my idea was. And he poked some holes in it pretty quickly, as the entrepreneur in him does. But it was helpful, one, for the business idea that I had, but also it just, I don't know, he's going to remember that, right? He's going to remember the kid who came up to him and pitched him a business idea. And then I asked him, I said, "Hey, you mentioned that you're interested or you love mentoring younger guys. I am one who loves mentorship, but I never want to ask or have a mentor where I can't add value back to them. I've seeked mentorship ever since I think high school, and really leaned into that, and it's been extremely successful for me. So adding another individual wealthy guy like Glenn to the picture could be huge for myself. But I wanted to add value to him, and we got lunch together and then ended getting dinner together. And I, again, just kind of kept asking questions and really listening to what his pain points were, right? He's being successful, but the parts that he didn't talk about in the presentation, right? When you're presenting anything, you want to sound great. You don't want to really mention the things that you're suffering with or having issues with. And I mean, anybody who's in multifamily knows that capital is probably one of the hardest parts of of scaling and doing deals. So I started to hear that multiple times and saying, "Hey, it sounds like capital is always like we're always looking for capital. We're always doing this." And he just said, "Hey, we've got this deal that we're raising for near Princeton University. It's the biggest deal that Colony's going to be doing." He's like, "I honestly don't even know if we have the team in place to be able to take it down. Are you interested in helping out a little bit and trying to see if you can raise some capital on this deal?" And sure enough, with not much experience on the capital raising side, was able to bring him a little over $6 million to that deal of equity. So uh, that raised his eyebrows a little bit and said,
Raised my
who is
eyebrows
this
too.
guy?" So again, that's the deeper, longer story of how it evolved. But I'm sure there's a few points in there that people can take away that, again, it starts with relationships, really listening to what the pain points are versus thinking about it for yourself, hearing what their struggles are and how you can add value, and then being in the right place at the right time also.
Matt, I love what you said. I want to play back what I think are a few important insights. First of all, you listened, right? There's a little bit of luck that's involved, right? But that's life. But you're at this conference, you're in this breakout session, you're listening to this guy talk, and you were obviously intrigued by him, by his story, his abilities to scale businesses as an entrepreneur. And in that, when that breakout session ended, instead of just running off to lunch like most everybody else does, you waited for him, you talked to him, you pitched him his idea or your idea. He poked some holes in it, but you kept the conversation going. You talked about mentorship, which he had mentioned earlier. You guys went to lunch and sat down, had lunch. You went to dinner. You kind of stayed in his vicinity to keep talking to him. And I think that's a really important thing. One, you got to just stand around and introduce yourself. Whether you have something to pitch or not, I don't think you should necessarily pitch right out of the gate, but take the time. You're sitting in a presentation, you enjoy the presentation, thank the presenter. Just don't rush off to the next thing. Take the time to sit there and just thank the person for presenting their ideas, right? Let them know, shake their hands. As someone who speaks, we love it. Okay. What we don't like is you finish presenting and everyone rushes out the room. And you're like, oh, maybe that wasn't very good, or maybe I suck, right? So you want people to stay and talk to you and shake your hands and ask you questions. That makes you feel good, right? On top of that, you took it further. You sat with lunch. You asked them more questions. And I just wrote down you to kind of, hung around the goal, right? So, if you want to score, you got to hang around the goal. And I was joking with my son about this the other day, but that's what you did. You knew this was a great guy to know. This is a great contact. It's not like you were going to leave and then maybe text an email. Who knows if he's going to respond at that point? So you took advantage of the opportunity you had in front of you, sitting there with him. You're able to go get lunch. You're able to go get dinner. And through this conversation, you realize, okay, there's an opportunity here for this guy to raise more capital. Maybe this is something that I can help with. So the insight here is when you have the ability to connect with really important people or people who can help you get to where you want to go, particularly if you've already identified they would make a great mentor, stay around them. They're not going to tell you, what problem to solve. They're not going to give you the challenge right away because they don't know. So you got to stick around long enough to figure something out and then present an opportunity or an option back to them. So I love that. You then told me he gave you a chance to raise money on this deal and you ended up raising $6 million. That's incredible. Absolutely incredible for your first raise. Let's talk about that. What do you think you did? Because I'm assuming that's abnormal, right? At this point. Okay.
I'm aware. Yeah.
Okay. Very abnormal. Very high standards for yourself. What do you think allowed you to raise $6 million on your first raise?
So I when I found out that he was going to give me this opportunity, one, I had to start with education of the deal, right? I had to be familiar with what my talking points were because it could be the first, it could be the fifth, it could be the 20th person that I talk to that's ready to write a check. But if I didn't know the deal, I could blow that opportunity. So the first thing I did was become knowledgeable about the offering, the opportunity. What are the five or six main points that are going to get people to raise their eyes? And I've always been, and I took this on the sales side when I was selling commercial and residential, is trying to listen to what people want versus trying to pitch your offering to every single person, right? Not everybody's going to be a fit for your investment, and you have to be okay with that. So I had already, I think it helped that I had a group of investors already on the residential and retail side. So I went to a couple of them first that were really struggling to find a deal that cash flowed that they were looking for. It also helped that this offering was very strong, right? It helped that the IRR was a 25 plus. It was a over 2.5x equity multiple. So it was a great opportunity that definitely helped me. So I started with, first off, I pitched, I think, my parents just to get a practice run. I hadn't had too much experience on the capital raising side, more on talking with brokers and underwriting deals. So pitched people that weren't going to be investing so that I could get comfortable giving the conversation. And then I leaned into some of the relationships that I already had, again, going back to relationships and referrals and other introductions. And then I said, you know what? Let me just go on LinkedIn. I forget where I was reading, but people were saying, hey, social media and some of these social platforms are a great place to meet people or get connected. And I just started connecting with people that were local to New Jersey, right? They were in that area. They could maybe drive by, and again, talking about being in the right place at the right time. And I'm not a full believer in luck, but more so one of the better quotes is when preparation meets opportunity is when you get lucky. So I ended up connecting with a fund of a fund syndicator who raises capital and then places it in deals. We connected and again, just cold called him, and we're talking a little bit about the opportunity. And he goes, "Hey Matt, you know what? I had 2.5 or 3 million bucks raised for this deal in Texas that ended up falling through. These investors need to place capital somewhere." And the deal ended up being closer to him with better returns. And then he went to the couple people that shot down his Texas deal and brought more capital into that opportunity. So I think I just had a mindset that I told Glenn at the outset that I was going to raise the entire equity check, which I think subconsciously I knew wasn't really going to happen. But I had that mindset, right, that I was going to raise the entire, I think it was 30 or $40 million of equity by myself. And he was like, "Oh, okay, hot shot. Let's see what you can do." But I think it takes that mindset to aim for the, what is it? Aim for the stars and land on the moon mentality. And I took that approach into the capital raising side. And again, I'm aware that 6 million was very unique, but I think the preparation as well as the energy, effort, and hard work, and a little bit of luck in there too. So that's kind
Yeah.
of what happened.
Matt, a lot of great insights there, man, and some great lessons that I want to make sure people understood. First and foremost, the thing I wrote down was you had a great deal. Okay. It starts with a great deal. And when you have a great deal, it's much easier to get people excited and on board. On top of that, you had a great proven operator. You weren't out there trying to do your own deal. And this is a huge mistake I see some people make. When you're new, you don't have a track record. So if you're going to go at this by yourself, people are going to question you as an operator and your skills and ability there. They're also going to question the deal. And if they don't really understand, real estate investing and syndication, all those things as much, everything that they're getting says, hey, don't do this. So you really want to make sure that you are aligning yourself with someone who has more experience, right? Whether that's a mentor, whether that's a partner or a coach. But you want to lean into that experience because that's going to make people feel more comfortable and it's going to help you, in what you're doing. The second thing was you had this great deal, right? So without getting to the numbers, you were able to deliver strong returns, 20 plus percent IRR, 2.5 equity multiple. So solid, really great returns for investors. But then I love your approach, right? Mentally, you came into it saying, I'm going to raise this whole check. And if I look at it from that standpoint, you fell woefully short, right, of raising the whole check. But you had to have such a huge goal in order for the action to match the necessary steps to get you even remotely close to there, right? If you set out and said, okay, I'm gonna raise 500,000, maybe you're not doing all the stuff you did, right? Maybe you're calling a couple of buddies, seeing what they say, and they said no. Oh well, never mind. And so many people do that because they think about their existing network. I'm gonna call the guys who invested in my single family stuff. And if they're in, great. But if they're not in, well, I guess I'm just not gonna be able to raise. You had a mentality of, okay, how do I raise 30? I'm going to need to talk to a lot of people, right? I'm going to need to have a tight sales pitch. I'm going to have to make sure I understand all the numbers and understand the deal. You went to your family first, which was low risk. And I think that's really important. Here's a great capital raising tip. When you're doing this for the first time, go to what I call low risk investors, meaning they're probably not going to invest either way. They don't have the money to invest. They're not really interested in investing, but it gives you a chance to warm up, right? To figure out, okay, I probably shouldn't say that, or hey, they asked this question. I didn't do a good job explaining that. Figure that out. Then move to people who are more likely to invest, who like you, know you, and believe in you. And then ultimately you can work up to maybe those higher net worth investors who are more strangers today and start to build those relationships. So I love everything about that approach because it really allows you to scale. You're getting good feedback. You're also putting yourself in a position to, by the time you start working up to those more experienced investors or the folks that you don't know as well, it's not like you're coming in cold. You've pitched it multiple times. You probably already have some commitment. So it's not like, this is the first person who's going to be investing. So you can share a little bit more about, hey, we're 30% there or 50% there or whatever the case is. And that's going to make people feel more likely to invest as well. So that is really a masterclass in how to approach this. So I appreciate you taking some time in breaking down that process. You have any questions or feedback, follow-ups there?
No, I would say even just now that I've been doing this for a little while, my partner and I still do when I do a lot of webinars now as well for our deals that we capture a larger amount of investors at one time versus doing 50 individual meetings. And we still do kind of some role play or practice pitches, right? So I'll pitch him and he'll say, you know what, I would tweak this, this, and this, or emphasize this point over that point. And that's still, again, it's repetition, it's
Yeah.
practice, so that when you're it's the game time and you got to go and the webinar is live, you've practiced this, it's muscle memory. Another What was the other point I wanted to make? Oh, I think part of it goes into I love sports. I see some of the basketball and the football there.
Yeah.
I played Division III baseball, so I've had a mentality of, hey, baseball players, if you hit 300 or 400, you're a really good baseball player. But you know what? You strike out or you fail more than you actually get on base. And I take that same mentality into the sales side of things as well as, hey, you know what? These 7, 8, 9 guys turn me down, but the next 3 or 4 could invest, and I'm right back to that average. So having that mindset of the law of average, right? Take a large amount of numbers. Don't get so discouraged by the first 6 people turn you down, because the next 3 or 4 could be ones that hit, right? So I think that experience in my time as a athlete also has leaned into some of my success as well.
Matt, I appreciate you sharing that. This really is a game of numbers. It's also a team sport. So the sports
Absolutely.
analogy makes sense because, you know, even with all that effort, if you didn't have Glenn and the deal and their track record, you probably raise very little on this opportunity, right? If you had just found a deal
Absolutely.
yourself. So it definitely requires a team. And that's one of the reasons we love the approach when it comes to syndication. Let's talk about, really how you're able to scale today. So I know you work with both high net worth investors, family offices, as well as retail investors. One, just to level set, explain kind of the differences between those three groups and where do you focus your efforts today?
So that's a good point, and we should kind of separate these types of investors and equity partners, because depending on the size of deals that you're doing, they may or may not apply, right? And if you're doing smaller deals, maybe locally to you, you can stick in your network, you can stick with friends and family. But if you really want to start to scale, right, what's that next step? You're doing a little bit larger deals, a little bit larger equity checks. You know what? Your friends and family may not have the capacity to be able to take on those larger deals. So you may go to a high net worth investor or an accredited investor. In our space, we run a 506c offering, which is a private placement that is only available to accredited investors. And accredited investors meet, there's a longer list of criteria, but a few of the common ones are annual income of $200,000 or more over the past 2 years, or if you're married, jointly 300,000 between the two for the past 2 years, or a net worth of $1 million or more, excluding your principal residence. And then there's some other little nuanced ones there where if you have certain licenses, and there's a couple other ones that help you qualify. Anyway, the accredited investor is usually a high net worth individual, either net worth or income. And then there's more of the institutional, right? So we're going to they can be either private equity groups, they can be hedge funds, they can be family offices, right? So one family or somebody who's famous, they might have 50 to $100 million, and they've got an arm or a percentage that invests in real estate. They could be allocating to one of our deals. some of the institutions are also like pension funds, and each one of them have different goals, right? Some can be very growth oriented where they want a higher return and don't necessarily need cash flow. Some others are looking for a lower total return, but want that monthly or quarterly dividend. So the institutional capital is usually looking to place above $5 to $10 million per deal. The high net worths are most likely looking to do between 50 to 100 to $200,000 per deal. So you have to know those different chunks or know those different categories, but also realize what deals you're doing and then know which groups to approach, right? If you're doing a $10 million deal that requires 2 million bucks of equity, you don't want to spend all your time pitching the institutions, right? Because you're going to get a lot of no's, and I'll save you some time there right now. So know who you are, know where you're at right now, not necessarily where you're going to be in 5 or 10 years, but maybe take that 10-year plan and then work backwards, right? Okay, we need to pitch the high net worths in the area, the doctors, the lawyers, the high earners. You can kind of stereotype some jobs as well, right? You can know that, okay, this job category usually makes X amount, and you can start to approach some of those people in your network. So hopefully that answers the conversation about those different categories. Any other points that I didn't hit on?
No, you hit it right. So you talk about, first of all, high net worth. We're talking about accredited investors, typically folks who meet that accreditation status, which you highlighted very well. But those folks are typically looking to park, 50K to 200K, maybe a little bit more. And then you have more your institutional investors who are typically looking to write $1 million checks, right? Starting off at 5 million and 10 million. Some groups are looking to rate, put a $2 to $3 million, but for the most part, many are looking to invest $5 million and up. And if you think about it, they typically have 50 million plus to invest, and they don't want to invest in 50 different deals. So they would much rather find a handful that they believe in, that they can track, really know the operators, and make those investments. For many of our listeners, they want that experience as well. So if you don't have that experience, that's something you're going to have to balance. So it may make more sense to focus on those accredited investors starting off. You talked about being able to track, doctors and other professions. I know you mentioned LinkedIn, being able to find some investors there. For those folks who are a little bit newer and are looking to tap into whether it be social media or their network to raise capital from accredited investors, give me a tip or a strategy that they should be aware of.
Trying to find the right answer here. I think it depends on one, what your capital investment is upfront, right? So at Colony, when I didn't have any capital, right, when I was just kind of raising, I was using LinkedIn because I didn't have a lot of capital to do upfront costs and have some of these services. But now that I'm a part of Colony, we have the capital investment, the marketing investment, where there's a monthly marketing spend. We have a couple agencies that help us. We've been super successful on Facebook and Instagram, actually. I think that that's becoming more and more popular where people are scrolling and then all of a sudden a investment pops up. But I don't know exactly how all the algorithms work, but they were maybe searching about multifamily on Google, and now they're seeing all their ads or these different sponsors. So we've had a tremendous amount of success recently making that pivot from Google and some of these other ad services to Instagram and Facebook, bringing investors in and then setting appointments that way. If you don't have that capital, there's so many free ways. Creating content has become such an important piece, right? Whether it's YouTube or just doing little videos, right? Teaching investors about something, you can build that level of credibility. So that's an easy, cheap way to do it. Um, but if you have the capital investment, I'm happy to kind of share some more information with you privately about kind of which groups that we've gone to for some of those marketing services. But they've been super successful. And if you get to that scale, and maybe another point I wanted to hit on with the high net worths, and the whole conversation is how do we scale, right? How do we grow? And most of these high net worth investors, especially even if you have the track record like Colony, they still want to do the minimum investment with you, right? They want to learn to know, like, and trust you. But then once you have them and you've proven all of those, okay, that $50,000 initial investment now turns into 150 or 200 on the next one. So that they're scaling their investment alongside yourself. So you don't have to go out and find new investors, right? They want to place that capital with 3 or 4 people that they trust versus having to check in on 50 different groups. So you're trying to make it easy for them, but you have to be successful on those 3 items. But they have a lot more cash. I'm just letting you know they have it in the back, even though they say they can only do the 550,000 or 100,000. We find that if you're able to deliver on what you say you're going to do, they come back and the checks get bigger and bigger each time. So especially if you're doubling their capital on investments, then they just roll it into the next one with you. So that's important to keep in mind too, is that those longer term relationships grow as well.
Matt, great stuff. To recap some of that accredited investor, you can find them if you don't have the money to build out a whole marketing strategy using the content, using some direct connections on social media. That's a great way to do it. Doesn't really cost money, does require time, but that's a great way to start. As you have more money available to you, you can start to do some paid ads and things like that. And then as you really build out your budget, your marketing budget, you can start to tap into other services, which is a little bit more of a pronounced approach to both identify, vet, and get your offerings in front of the right people. So as you scale in your business and your capital raising needs, so are the marketing tactics and strategies that you can employ to meet them. A lot of great stuff, Matt. For folks who want to learn more, they can go to colonyhillscapital.com. That's your website, colonyhillscapital.com. We will link to that in the show notes. But right now, we're going to transition and go to our round of insights. They say you're the average of the 5 people you spend the most time with. So if you want to grow as a multifamily investor, you have to spend more time with other multifamily investors. And an easy way to do that is to join our apartment investing mastermind group today. Just go to casmoncapital.com and click on the mastermind button. Now, as a part of this group, you'll get access to expert trainings, group coaching calls, industry news and updates, as well as all of our webinars and workshops, including our 3-hour workshop on raising capital. Again, if you want to be around other multifamily investors that can help you scale your portfolio today and grow your network, make sure you're a part of the Apartment Investing Mastermind. Just go to casmoncapital.com and click on the Mastermind button today. Give me a failure or an apparent failure that sets you up for later success.
Ooh, that's always a great question. Let's see. I would say this happened on the brokerage side when I was selling, and I think it goes back to don't count your chickens before they hatch. I had a couple of deals that were lined up. I was expected to have the best month that I was ever going to have on the sales side of things, and I started again counting my commission checks or my checks before they came in, and I started making some investments in my business, spending money personally, things of that nature, and then the deals fell through, every single one of them. And I don't know what exactly happened, but looking back, that was a big kind of moment where I had to reset individually and reevaluate how I was going about my business and things of that nature. And I kind of take that approach now as well with capital raising. So we can have a great investor call, right? The guy or gal sounds like they want to move forward, they're interested in our offering. I'm not just going to assume that they're going to invest, right? Until that capital the docs are signed and the capital is committed, I'm not going to count that investment. So continuing to develop that relationship, reach out to them, check in, answer any other questions that they have after the fact, making sure that you're not counting those investors before they're actually committed, right? So I think that's super important with capital raising, right? If you need to raise $1 million for a deal and you've got 1 or 2 or 3 people that are soft committing to your deal, you don't want to be like, oh, we're not going to raise anymore, and because we've got this capital committed, and then next thing you know, you get to the closing table. Hey guys, remember those checks you said you were going to send in? Well, we're closing tomorrow. We'd love to have them in. Oh, Matt, sorry. This came up personally. I can't invest the $200,000 anymore. And you're like, oh my God. So I think that's important, right? Is to always be capital raising. The worst time to raise capital is when you need capital, right? So developing those relationships, even when you don't have a deal, so that when you do have the next one, you've already prepped your investors. You know what their liquidity is at any given time. And that's something that we've been doing recently at Colony, is continuing to develop those relationships with our investors. Investor relations are even more important, so to speak, than the actual investor pitches. But that's probably something that has happened in a previous career that I've been able to translate to what I do now.
Love it. All right, give me a digital or mobile resource you recommend for our listeners.
I'm a visual learner, so I learn best when I either listen or I watch. So YouTube is a massive place for me. I anything I look up, I don't even go to Google anymore. I just go to YouTube and I how to do this, or there's so much free content online now to learn. So I use YouTube a ton. I don't, again, even love to listen to podcasts. I even want to see them just talk and see their mannerisms, how people communicate. I think that's super important. So I think consuming as much content as possible, hearing different opinions and just hearing different people, even if it's multifamily, don't just listen to one person, right? You follow their channel, that's great, but listen to 5, 6, 7, 8 other people because they might provide different insights than just that one person. So I would always recommend YouTube to anybody. I know that's not a sexy answer, but it's where I found success personally.
Give me the book you've recommended or gifted the most in the last year.
One that I just read/listened to was The Power of the Subconscious Mind. I'm a big believer in, if you're familiar with The Secret or kind of self-talk and mindset, I think that's one of the most powerful tools that I've learned over the past couple of years is mindset and the power of believing in success and even capital raising with anything. I found that first to be true when I was in college. I was never a big believer in, I'd make goals, but they'd always be kind of in the back of my mind. And the first time I actually wrote down the 3 or 4 goals that I had and sat it right next to my nightstand, and I looked at it every night before I went to bed and every morning when I woke up. And sure enough, after 6, 12 months, every single goal on that list, and they were pretty out there goals that I wanted to hit. I was like, oh, those will never happen, but let me just put it there. All of them hit. And that was the first time for me. I was like, you know what, there might be something here. So the power of training your subconscious and that strong belief and your community, right, who you surround yourself with is extremely important.
Give me a daily habit that helps you stay focused on your goals.
Kind of going just back to what I talked about, right? Seeing those goals. I just put up a big vision board in my bedroom. So I see all of the personal things and lifestyle things that I want, some personal goals with my business and with Colony I've got on there as well. So seeing and visualizing that success every single day in the morning and at night is a huge reminder. And the more and more you see it, the more you subconsciously believe it.
Give me your number one insight for raising capital.
I guess I'd have to go back to aiming for the stars and landing on the moon, right? If you've got to raise $5 million for a deal, say you're going to raise 10 and have that list of people that when you were oversubscribed, hey, you know what, I'll get you back on the next deal. But always plan to raise more than you actually need. And because you'll have people fall out or there'll be another deal that pops up, but go back to shooting for the stars and landing on the moon and really developing those relationships with new relationships, but also the ones that you already have, right? Check in on those friends you haven't called in 6 or 12 months and just hear how they're doing, but always not be afraid to ask for a referral and say, hey, you know what, I know this isn't a great fit for you, but is there anybody in your network or in your community that's mentioned something like that? And you never know who you're gonna be introduced to. And when I was in the sales career, one of my partners, such a great story. He was selling like a small investment property or it was like very small commission check for him personally. But that investor ended up being his best referral source and sent him 10 investors who all closed deals with him. So you never know who 1 or 2 people are going to be that end up being that person that you need to help you scale into the next place that you want to be. So never take any relationship or any person for granted along the way.
Matt, let's go in a different direction. You're based in Richmond. Give me your favorite place to grab a bite to eat.
Oh, that's a good one. John. There's a place that's got a couple locations here in Richmond called Wood and Iron. I'm a sports guy, as we've talked about. So it's a nice sports bar. They've got great beer and wings and burgers and things of that nature. So it's always a good spot to catch a game or hang out with some buddies there. So I love going to Wood and Iron.
Wood and Iron it is. Matt, you give us a lot of great information, man. I really enjoyed hearing about your story and how you met Glenn, met him at this event, listened to him at the breakout, and you just kind of went in straight sales mode, right? And just staying tight with him, getting lunch, getting dinner, figuring out how you could add value, and ultimately raising $6 million for that deal. And then sharing how you're able to do that, understanding, the relationships you had, starting with kind of the soft, low risk pitches with your family members, then moving on to folks you had already worked with, and then eventually exploring new relationships, leveraging social media and talking to new investors. Lots of great information. Appreciate you sharing all of that, how to scale in real estate, specifically when it comes to raising capital for deals. Again, for folks that want to learn more, they can check out your website and go to colonyhillscapital.com. Matt, thanks again for being a great guest and coming on Multifamily Insights. We look forward to staying in touch with you, and I hope you have a great day.
Thanks, John.